Moderators asked Bowman and Latimer whether there are any circumstances where the U.S. should cut off military aid. It'll be an interesting question to see, how this is answered, considering that Latimer has received somewhere around like $14 million in outside expenditure money, and the vast majority of that coming from AIPAC affiliated super PACs. To be fair, $2 million came from a cryptocurrency group called Fair Shake. And it turns out there's crypto, but they also think that there should be no discussion as to whether we would condition aid to Israel in the midst of them committing a genocide upon the Palestinian people. But here is Latimer and Bowman.
With the first topic, which is the war between Israel and Hamas. The Middle East is 5,000 miles away from the district, but the war between Israel and Hamas has been one of the hottest issues
for one
in
second.
this race.
This idea, like it's 5,000, like what? Let me just imagine, let's say the question was about Chinese tariffs. What do we say? Like, China is so far away, but do we really need tariffs?
Yeah, it's like it's 1839 or something.
Exactly. Like,
yeah.
Congress is in charge of voting to allow expenditures for foreign policy, foreign aid, weapons sales. What is the difference in how far away it is?
Yeah, the weapons are going.
Well, so, I mean, if you're upset about like that notion, then take it up with the people that are pumping millions and millions of dollars into this race to preserve a structure or a system that is that many miles away, right? I mean, it's being put at the forefront of this race because of all the dark money that's being poured in to preserve our interests in that particular region. And then there's, of course, the added frustration of at least some of these outlets are calling it the war on Gaza now. I can't deal with the Israel-Hamas war thing anymore. It does so much work to cover up what Israel is doing here, but continue.
Between Israel and Hamas. The Middle East is 5,000 miles away from the district, but the war between Israel and Hamas is one of the hottest issues in this race, as you both know. And we want to start the debate by asking you to tackle a few questions about this conflict. And we're going to start with Mr. Bowman.
Pause it for one second. I mean, why isn't, put the context of why it's such a big deal. It's because AIPAC affiliated PACs are spending $14 million in a primary.
So many ads.
I mean, it's extraordinary. We've never seen anything like this. And it's not like this is obscure news. Everyone knows it, but apparently it can't be said on Spectrum News. We have a spectrum, but we're not that far. The spectrum isn't
the
that,
narrow spectrum.
It's not that broad. Go ahead.
A few questions about this conflict, and we're going to start with Mr. Bowman. This is a question for both of you, however. One of the most important powers you have in the House of Representatives is the power of the purse. Are there any circumstances in this war in which the United States should cut off giving weapons or aid to Israel? For example, do you support funding Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system? Mr. Bowman.
We should not be sending any more weapons at this time to Israel. They are engaged in collective punishment by killing mostly women, children, and babies in Gaza. We need a permanent ceasefire down. We need a release of all of the hostages, and we need the humanitarian aid to get into Gaza as quickly as possible. We see famine setting in, and we see the majority of the people killed are civilians, and again, mostly women and children. My opponent supports this collective punishment and has not condemned Netanyahu's response to the horrible attacks on October 7th, which we have condemned. The only pathway to peace is a political pathway, and we need to do everything in our power to ensure Palestinian freedom and a Palestinian state, and that is how you end Hamas's reign.
Mr. Latimer, same question. Do you support funding? Is there any circumstances in this war in which the U.S. should cut off giving weapons or aid to Israel?
Well, first of all, he didn't answer your question. I'll answer it as part of my comments. What the congressman fails to mention in all of this is the role that Hamas has played. It's not merely a simple condemnation of what they did. What they did that day on October 7th triggered everything that has followed afterwards. And I believe that Hamas has purposely put their civilian population in the line of fire on purpose. We saw some emails that would surface today that talked about the leader of Hamas saying that these were necessary casualties on behalf of the greater Palestinian cause. I believe the path to peace starts with release of hostages, cessation of hostilities, and then humanitarian aid, which is supervised by some third party, most likely a group of folks from within the Muslim world. At this stage of the game, I'm going to trust that President Biden, Secretary Blinken will do the negotiations that are necessary between the various players in the game and come back with a plan that will work. Under those circumstances, I would not yet see the Congress step in to exert their authority unless that process fails.
So you disagree with Bowman about cutting off aid?
I do.
Okay.
In other words, he didn't answer the question. He's the one who did not answer the question. And he still didn't, even at the end. You disagree with Bowman about it. Are there any conditions that George Latimer would condition weapons sales to Israel? And the answer is, I can't answer because of the $14 million that have been deployed by AIPAC-affiliated PACs in my attempt to win this primary.
And he's also upholding this false notion that the release of hostages is in some way like that Bowman's position is in contrast or contradictory to wanting the hostages released. Because we know that the majority of hostages overwhelmingly had been released during the temporary ceasefire. Over 100 were during that time period. And during that time, there have been a few more that have been saved during rescue operations by Israel, but that has come at like an incredible cost to the Palestinian people. And we don't even know how many hostages have been killed by Israeli bombs. So that's also like a false dichotomy or a false situation that's set up by these AIPAC talking points.
Yeah, the AIPAC guy thinks the question isn't answered until you talk about Hamas and act like history started on October 7th.
Here is an ad that Bowman released last week.
Billions of dollars sent overseas, thousands of deaths. I'm Jewish.
I'm a vet. This war is unpopular and an atrocity.
Jamal Bowman was one of the first champions in Congress to try to end this war.
His opponent, George Latimer, is for the war.
Latimer's biggest supporters are a right-wing lobbying group.
They picked him to run. Spends millions attacking black leaders like Jamal.
Endless war, Latimer taking millions from Republicans.
I voted for Latimer in the past, but I'm done. Just say no to that Trumpy George Latimer.
Billions of dollars.
Totally Trumpy.
Totally Trumpy. And I hope they're also making that point clear that you said, what you talked about with taxes on the wealthy, which is that George Latimer would kill Biden's economic plans for the future. Joe Biden does not support the Democrats' vision to make our society more equitable, that kind of thing.
100%.
And all the ads are like hitting Bowman for not voting on the infrastructure bill, for instance.
Exactly.
So Bowman's vote was because he wanted to be stronger. And surprise, like all this stuff in the news saying voters aren't sure who to credit for the infrastructure bill. Well, you calling it bipartisan the whole time. What do you think?
There is this bizarre dichotomy, or not dichotomy, but the way it's presented. Like the progressives were the ones that wanted the Biden agenda over the finish line before the Republicans took back the House with a narrow majority. It was the centrists, it was Gottheimer in the House, it was Manchin and Sinema in the Senate who killed it. So make that case, I think, as well. Latimer is Sinema, Manchin 2.0. That could be an ad that you take out.
That's actually, I think, on, what was it, on Friday or Wednesday?
Did you say that?
Oh,
God, we
when
talked
was
too much.
Osama on?
Yep, that was Wednesday. Yeah.
Wednesday. Yes, we had the comms director for Justice Democrats. I'm like, this guy is Joe Manchin from Westchester, essentially. And that's exactly
It's honestly insulting to Manchin. Like, Manchin has more person skills and probably politician skills than Latimer. Latimer is just like, I don't know.
He's a hired gun.
Yeah, like, let's go get the, I don't know. more of a plant.
A lot of people mocking Latimer, saying stuff like he just can't see.
Yeah.
He it seems to have a sleepy eye.
Well, he
So that's
definitely
why
has
he's
a
always got this
wandering
thing-
eye as
yeah.
it relates to his wife.
Sounds like a sound drop.
Now we're opening up the phone lines.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.